You're listening to episode number 68 of the Transform Your Life from the Inside Out podcast. On this episode, it is a Monday Q&A episode, and of all the questions I get, this is one that I think is going to resonate with a lot of people. And the question for today's episode is this, and this is exactly how they ask it. It's a very simple question. How do I manage my anger? Now, the reason I picked this is because I'm sure it will resonate with a lot of you, so stay tuned. Hi, I'm Jim Fortin, and you're about to start transforming your life from the inside out with this podcast. I'm widely considered the leader in subconscious transformation, and I've coached superachievers all around the world for over 25 years. Here, you're going to find no rah-rah motivation and no hype, because this podcast is a combination of brain science, transformational psychology, and ancient wisdom all rolled into one to take your life to levels you've never thought possible. If you're wanting a lot more in life, to feel better, to heal, to have peace of mind, to feel powerful and alive, and to bring more abundance and prosperity into your life, then this podcast is for you, because you're going to start learning how to master your mind and evolve your consciousness. And when you do that, anything you want then becomes possible for you. I'm glad you're here. Okay, so anger. You know, in my transformational programs, this comes up a lot, and it's not just men, it's women. I think culturally, a lot of times we think that here in the US and in the West, that men have anger issues and etc. But really, across the board, it's men and women, and I see a lot of this in my programs. So the first question would be is what is anger? Now, anger, and over the years, I've looked for different definitions, and to be to be transparent with you, I've even looked at my own life with anger that I've had in the past, and even looked at and said, well, what's causing that? Where is that coming from? All right, and I'm going to talk a little about me because I'm sure a lot of you can relate to my life and anger that I used to have, which I no longer do, and I want to talk to you about actually how to move through anger. So. The definition of anger is an internal response to external stimuli, or stimulus, meaning that you're having an internal response, meaning you're thinking something based upon something outside of yourself. Plain and simple, that is what anger is. Also, it can be a response to stress or frustration, meaning you feel like, I can't control something, I can't make something happen, and that can also be, situations that bring on anger. And normally, but not always, normally for most of us that are pretty well balanced is that generally the degree of anger is usually proportionate to the degree, here's the operative word, of perceived stress or frustration. Now, what I mean by that is something can happen and one person can perceive it to be a high level of stress or frustration, and therefore they have a high level of anger, and a second person can perceive it to be a low level of stress or frustration and have a low level of anger, but yet the same external thing has happened. Now, I'm not really going to dig into it in this episode, but all of my programs and most of this podcast, for the most part, even notice the title of the podcast, Transform Your Life from the Inside Out, is about internal state management. And when we get angry, we're having the internal state of anger that we're experiencing, but it's something externally causing it. And we're not managing ourselves. Basically, we're working from what I say, you've heard me say a bazillion times, we're working from the outside in instead of the inside out. Also, reasons that people get angry is generally speaking, and I've noticed this in my own life, is that it's a response when someone thinks that someone else is trying to hurt them, whether that other person trying to, in terms of perception, trying to hurt someone is either conscious or completely unconscious. Now, the reason that I give you that is because I've spent a lot of time thinking about human emotions. And you'll hear different speakers say, oh, these are the six predominant emotions, or we have to have these, and all these things about emotions. and we are obviously emotional creatures. We're also hardwired, reptilian part of the brain, the oldest part of the brain. We are also hardwired for survival. So it makes sense that all of our predominant emotions are survival related. And when you look at anger, it's definitely survival related. It's because most people get angry about something, and we'll talk about triggers here just very quickly. I'm not going to go into triggers, but I'll talk about them. But most people actually go into anger when they think they're not getting something they want or something they need or their expectation about other people in some way, in some context, and then people go into anger. And that's very true when I look at my own life. When I felt like I wasn't getting things that I wanted or deserved or were supposed to be given to me or whatever, I would get into anger. And if you look at your own life, most times, and also you can learn anger, so I'll go there in a moment, but most times you're angry because you're not getting something that you think that you want from someone else, or you're not being accorded something that you think that you want. And again, I want to point out that it's completely interpretation, expectation, and subjective, because two people can have two very different interpretations and evaluations of what they think they deserve or what they want or what people are supposed to give to them. Now, people also have triggers that drive them into anger. And I'll give you a couple here for example. Now, one could be and this is survival based, is that when a person is threatened or attacked. Now, you might notice that when you're threatened or attacked verbally, what do you go into? What emotions do you go into? You may go into fight or flight, but that's survival, okay? Many times also people become angry when they are feeling powerless. Now, I do want to point out that, which I'm not going to go into in this episode, is that people can also learn what's called learned helplessness, which also means that no matter we've come to believe that no matter what we do, we have learned that we cannot help ourselves. And again, that's nothing more than psychological conditioning over time, and it's nothing more than a thought process. Other things, other triggers that can drive people into anger, I see this one a lot, as actually a whole lot, is when people feel like they're being invalidated or they're treated unfairly. And again, these are, interpretations. And let me go here for a second about being invalidated. You ever notice when you call, and I'm just making this up, but like the phone company and or any major company, you ever noticed how you feel when you feel like you're not being listened to, like someone's not hearing you? Many times what we do, and I used to do the same, I do no longer do that, but what many people do is if they feel like they're not being heard, what they want to do automatically is they want to be louder and they want to start talking louder because you're not hearing me. The person on the other end of the phone. And people get into this nonsense all the time also when it comes to political arguments, which are obviously every 9 seconds here in the United States on Facebook or Instagram or somewhere for the past few years. But people want to be heard. They want to know, do other people, do you validate what I'm saying? Do you hear me? And many times this is a big trigger for a lot of people is if they feel that they're not being heard or they're not being validated. And something else that I find interesting is that people get into anger when they feel like they're being judged. And the interesting thing about that is you know, that would be like me saying, and I've been there before, so I get it, okay? But that would be like me saying, you know what? Every time a dog barks, I get angry. Well, that's what dogs do, right? They bark. So if that's in the nature of a dog to bark, why would I be angry at a dog for barking? And I've created episodes here. One of the episodes is I'm not who you think I am. You are who you think I am. A recent episode, and it's all about people judging us. So many of you are triggered when you feel like you're being judged. But the interesting thing, like the metaphor of the dog, dogs bark, people judge. So if people judge, then what would cause us to get into anger and hold it when this is just what people do? Right? I mean, even right now, you're judging the podcast. And you guys are judging it either, now fortunately for me, most of you are judging it positively, but you're judging positively, or you could say something like, one of the comments, and like I said, I promise I don't read them. I don't stay up at night going, oh my gosh, I got a new review on my podcast. I have to go see what this person's. I don't go there. Why? Because if I did, then I would potentially be allowing my internal state to be driven by my external state or my interpretations or whatever it is. Let me segue there for a second also. I remember finishing the last podcast, and I sent a heartfelt, genuine thank you to all of you that listen. If you've not done it yet and you're getting value here, and why else would you why else would you come listen if you are not getting value? If you would please, seriously, please leave a positive review here at iTunes if you're listening on iTunes. And the reason why is because that helps me reach more people. And when I say that it helps me reach more people, what I mean by that is it just validates when people come and they visit or they look at reviews or whatever. And hopefully, the validation, it's called social proof, which is the formal psychological word. It gives me more social proof and obviously, will help pull people in and listen to the podcast so they can also transform their life. So at this point, what I want to share with you, my observation is looking at my own life. And I've taught persuasion and influence for a lot of years to marketing and selling professionals. And I always go with the latest brain-based research, neuro research, etc. And many times people will say, Jim, your content's really innovative. Now, I'm not teaching it right now. I've been doing only transformation for the past 3 years, which I've done for a lot of years. But I'm doing only transformational work right now because it really lights me up. But people would say things like, Jim, that's a really innovative strategy, strategy you came up with. Where did that come from? And it's really pretty simple. Is I just watch myself because we all have the same kind of brain. We have different programming in the brain, but we all have the same brain. We all have the reptilian brain, the mammalian brain, the prefrontal cortex, etc. And when I look at myself, what I look in the world and I just see you as a reflection of me and me as a reflection of you and what I've been conditioned to do in some ways. If you've been conditioned in the same way, you do the same things. So my observation at looking at my life is that I used to get into anger when I was not getting something that I thought that I deserved or something that I thought should be accorded to me or use whatever word that you want, but that's the gist of it. If I wasn't getting something, and I'm going to tell you right now, if you look at your husband, your wife, your boyfriend, your girlfriend, I don't know, maybe you have both, a husband and wife, and I don't know. I don't know how you live your life. But if you look at when you get angry, for the most part, many times it's because you're not getting what you think that you want. And then your automatic response, which is unconscious, is to go into anger. I don't know where you are in the process with me in terms of, being, here and listening to the podcast. If you're new, I do recommend, not because I recommend it, but because I hear it a lot from a lot of people, go back to episode number 1 and just start the entire series and go there. But for the rest of you that have been with me for a while, you've heard me talk about my brother-in-law, the shaman, which I talk about on pretty much every single podcast because he has brought me decades of transformational growth, personal evolvement, energetic evolvement, which, by the way, one of the podcast episodes coming up, which I love and I'm excited for, is about being, which you might have heard me say before, is we're not spiritual beings, we're not human beings, we're predominantly cosmic beings. And I'll tackle that. I think it's the next episode, by the way. But I remember one day that he, and I've shared this in the podcast before, is that he was sharing with me, he was talking to me, and he said to me, he calls me Jimmy, and he goes, your biggest limitation is your expectations. And you have all these expectations, which are also stories of the world. And I remember where I was. This was so like a 2x4 to the head. I lived in New York City. This was 20 years ago. And he said, or 22, 23 years ago, and he said, your biggest limitation is your expectations. And then he said, when people don't do what you want or expect from them or what you think they should do, then you get into your anger. And then he goes, you know what? You're irritated. You're blah, 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 blah. And you get into all this mental nonsense when the world doesn't do and people don't do what you think they should do. And I'm not that person today, and I share that with you because it probably pertains to a lot of you. So, quite seriously, when you look at what triggers the anger, it's probably because you're not getting something or people are not doing what you think in your model of reality you think what they should be doing. Okay, I'm going to keep on going here, but I want to give you a really quick little hack here, an anger hack is that when your partner, your wife, your boyfriend, your kids, when someone's actually angry with you, most likely the reason that they're angry is obviously the stories and the expectations they're having of you, but generally it's because they're not getting something from you. And if you want to diffuse anger very quickly, you can ask somebody this very simple question. And the question is this. Are you ready? The question is, what is it that you want from me? What is it that you want from me? And let's look at this. Look at your own life. As I just said, and I've said a few times, generally when you're in anger, it's because you're not being heard, you're not getting something, somebody's not meeting your stories, not meeting your expectations. But notice that you're wanting something. And then notice also when you get that something satiated, the anger goes away. Also, I want to point out is we learn what anger is and how to be angry. So, to give you an example, I tell people that for babies, happiness is a factory setting. I mean, babies are born happy. You see babies that are not happy when, they're crying when they want to be held, they want love, they want food, or they want their diaper changed. Otherwise, babies are always, smiling. And you don't see babies, if you look at a 1-year-old toddler, um, now, okay, I'm going to get myself in a little trouble here because people, I was going to make a little joke here and say, well, you don't see babies saying, Mom, what are you talking about? Or Dad, I don't want string peas. I want carrots for dinner. And I was going to laugh there because your kid, your kid could dump the food upside down on their head, throw it on the floor, whatever. But generally, you don't see babies getting angry because the world is not meeting their expectations, at least at that age. But what I want to share with you is you've learned to be angry to whatever degree that you have it or hold it by watching your parents. One of my friends, I'm just going to leave, yeah, I'm going to leave it at that. One of my friends is angry with his mother to a certain degree because and he's in his 30s now, and he's angry, as are his siblings, because they don't think they got from their mother what they should have gotten from, air quote, a traditional mother. And they're angry many years later. So again, that just reinforces what I'm sharing with you. But we learn by watching our parents. So maybe, for example, that you've been brought up, maybe your mom or your dad would go into bouts of rage, which is anger on steroids. They'd go into bouts of rage, and you learned at a very early age, hey, it's okay. That's how we respond to the world in this family. When I don't get what I want, then I go into a bout of rage or anger, or I throw something, and guess what? That's how I get what I want. Now, me personally, my parents, and there's for all people, there's a level of, or not a level of self-awareness in a lot of people, but there's a difference between who we think that we are and who we actually are. A disparity between these two things, these two, views of ourselves, or this view of who we are and who other people think that we are. And my parents, I think they thought that they were parents that gave their kids a lot of latitude and a lot of autonomy, but the reverse is true. I remember that my brother and sister and we were controlled very much as kids. Now, what my parents thrived on hearing, and this is back in the 70s. I mean, I'm 54 now, and when they would take us to dinner on Friday night or something, or whatever, on the Saturday or whatever, my parents, I tell you, I look back now 45 years ago, 46, 47 years ago, and my parents would thrive, and I mean thrive, when people would say, oh my gosh, you have the most well-behaved kids. Your kids are amazing. Other kids come in here and they're crying and throwing things, but your kids, no, your kids are amazing. Well, my parents turned us into robots. I mean, literally as kids, We were expected to sit up and not put our elbows on the table. And I think that part of being a kid was taken away from us. But where I want to go here is that autonomy was taken away from us as well as authority. My parents would also, like many times, say, "Well, I'm going to let it be your choice." And I think my parents thought that if they gave us choice, we would learn to choose as children. But the caveat was my parents would say, "Okay, I'm going to let you choose, but you can only choose from what I'm putting in front of you right now. You can only choose A, B, and C, but you cannot choose D, E, and F." So as a kid, I had, and I just knew it at some level, but I had a lot of autonomy and authority taken away from me. Now, more about me because I know this pertains to a lot of you. Why? Because we're all the same. Is for many years I grew up with low grade anger. Now, what I mean by that is I was not the explosive, angry person. No one that knows me in 25 years can tell me they've ever seen me yell at anyone. That's not my way. It's not what I do. Well, the last time I remember yelling at anybody was in college, and that's a funny story I'm not going to go into now in the podcast. But I had this low grade anger at the world, and I recognized many years ago that the anger was actually what it was being caused by was a feeling of which I'm in a different place in my life now, but it was caused by not feeling like I had control in the world, which, by the way, I'm going to go a whole different direction very quickly, is control is an illusion. I think I even shot an episode, or not shot, but recorded an episode on it, is that control is an illusion. And I'll share something else with you. For all of you listening, when you get into control, because control is an illusion, you're actually controlled by the illusion of control. Consider that. Control is an illusion. And when you get into the issue of control, you were controlled by the illusion of control. So I think my low grade anger came from for many years, which again, I'm operating at a completely different level in this life. When I say in my teens, in my 20s, is that I never felt like I could control anything, and that would put me in the anger. And I learned that because I never had any control as a kid. So we learn from watching explosive parents or we learn by watching how our parents respond to the world at a very early age, and then however they respond is actually how we learn to respond. The reverse could be is that a person does not communicate. And then when the person doesn't communicate, they get into anger because they feel like they're not being heard. And because they don't communicate, they're not being heard. And then that causes the anger. So, anyway, I just want to point out however you actually get into anger at this point in your life is because you have learned to do that at a very early age. I'm going to make a general statement here, and it's very general. This is not scientific. I do not do hypnosis anymore. I was a hypnotherapist for many years, but it's been 20 years or so. But what I noticed also, and there's research around this, but what I noticed empirically is that the people that were the most unhealthy and had the most ailments in the body were also the people that had the most counterproductive emotions, and especially anger. Anger is an extremely unhealthy emotion when it's held. It can be a defense mechanism, but many people hold anger for a lot of years. Now, when I started, I said that anger is a byproduct of stress, meaning something's not happening, we can't control, which causes stress. I didn't go just look up. This is just from memory. I didn't go look it up right before the podcast. But there are significant health consequences to living your life full of stress. And research has demonstrated if it's not 90%, I know it's 85% of all illness is stress related. So think about that and think about what your anger is actually doing to you. I'm not going to go too far here, but for example, anger. When you're in anger, you're affecting the endocrine system in the body. And it's quite literally, to give you a metaphor here, it's like just a slow IV drip. It's like anger, drip, 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 drip. And you're creating these not healthy emotions in the body, which affect the chemical composition of the body, because your endocrine system talks to your body, and your body actually is alive, and all your cells talk. And when you live in all this anger, literally, it's like you've cocooned and enveloped yourself in just an anger bath, and that is not healthy. Okay, so the question is let me go somewhere differently here, and then I'm going to give you some practical solutions here. If somebody said, how do I manage my anger? That was the exact question. How do I manage my anger? Okay, the Buddha said, if there is no anger in you, you cannot be angry. So where I work from at this point in my life is to be anger free. Because remember, I said anger is created by your stories and your expectations of what you think other people owe you, or you deserve, or you're not getting, or should be getting, or etc. And if you've listened for any time to this podcast, I've interviewed people, some of my students, and they talk about the power of stories. So if you're having trouble with anger right now, what I want you to look at is, what are my stories about anger? What are my interpretations about anger? What meanings am I giving things that create and precede the anger? So I'd love to say, and I say this working with a shaman for many years because I have never seen him. I was just with him for 2 weeks on family vacation. I have never, and I mean never, in 25 years, ever, ever seen him be in anger. I have only seen him be happy and loving and kind and jovial and joyful and supportive, but not once have I seen anything, not even to 1% degree, akin to anger. And being a shaman, I was also mentored for some time alongside him with the shaman who was his mentor. And his shaman once said to me, and there are other more formal names for it, but I use this just for cultural vernacular so you can understand when I say his shaman and stuff. I mean, there are other words that I use in my personal life with it. But his shaman told him, and he told me, no person is worth my anger. Consider that. No person is worth my anger. So what a lot of people do is they get into all these stories, and I've been there, as I said, all these stories and these interpretations about what they're supposed to get and how they're supposed to be validated and how they're not supposed to be judged, and especially how other people are supposed to be in the world, including kids, if you're a parent, because parents actually many times are triggered by their kids and they go into a lot of anger, and what they're actually doing is teaching kids, hey kids, here's how to watch mommy and daddy have anger, and we're going to teach you to live your life the same way and have anger like we do because we're triggered by you guys and toys all over the house and the chocolate milk that's been spilt and everything else. But imagine this. If there were no anger in you, the things that people do and the expectations and the stories and all these triggers, they wouldn't effectively work because there's no anger in you. I also want to point out that anger never solves anything. And that hit me like a hammer one time. I was talking to a really good friend of mine, very close. Well, I'm going to share with you just the general details. He and his wife, and this, I could shoot a whole episode on this as well, and I'm not going to. Or just when I say shoot, I shoot a lot of video too. I could create an entire episode on this, and I probably will at some point. But he said to me, he goes, you know what? He goes, my wife and I, we have no sex life. Now, there can be many reasons for that. I mean, she could be, and it's very real, she could be asexual. There are people that are just non-sexual people. And he and I were talking one time, and we talked about it prior for some time. And he said, you know what? He goes, my wife actually just runs around with her family and acts like we have the best relationship in the world. We have no intimacy physically. And he said, you know what? He said, I used to get into a lot of anger about it. And then he said one day, this is what he said, and I'm like, wow, that's very powerful. He said, anger solves nothing. So consider that. Anger solves nothing. And then I go back to what I told you earlier about no person is worth your anger. Now, I want to share also that, you know what? This could be something you could adopt very quickly. Most people make change very hard. Most people, when they change, they think, oh, I've got to make it this arduous and long process. And the truth is this: you can change anything in your life very, very quickly. I think it's episode number 5 where I talk about habits. Well, anger is also a habit. People don't think about it that way. They think of habits as like drinking Diet Coke or biting their fingernails or different behavioral habits or gambling or whatever. But thought and thought that we have over and over and over. So, for example, if the same things trigger you, well, guess what? That's a habit. Anger is a habit. And then many times we might even be in the habit of anger, not even knowing that we are in the habit of anger. So where I work from in my life, and then I'm going to give you a little practical, some steps here. But where I work from in my life, and this has been right at the forefront of my life the last few years, and I think it's the Dalai Lama who said this. He said, and this is powerful, and this could be, some lifetime work for some people, but he said, let nothing. What did he say here? He said, let something. Well, I'm going to just paraphrase. Let nothing anyone does take your internal peace. Think about that. Let nothing anyone does take your internal peace. And you probably heard me talk about here the most powerful place that we can be as a being. The most powerful place that we can be is in mental well-being. When you are in mental well-being, you are then a high functioning being on the planet. Okay, so let's look at some practical things here before we wrap up this episode. Okay, so here's things that I would suggest. These are practical application things. Number one is if you're getting into anger, look at your expectations of others. Now, as I said, I alluded to earlier, you might have kids. What are your expectations of kids? Are your expectations realistic for kids? I mean, kids and children are going to do what kids and children are going to do. And are your expectations that kids should not do that? So, number one is look at your expectations of others, including, if you're triggered by your children, your expectations of your children. Number two, and I'm sure you can find some book on Amazon on this, is CBT, yeah, cognitive behavioral therapy. With cognitive behavioral therapy, it's not like talk therapy, like you would go to psychoanalysis or any of that. It's quite literally cognitive processes to intervene with irrational behavior. Basically, it's a rational way to manage irrational behavior. And by the way, anger is unconscious and irrational. I mean, no one ever says, you know what? It's like 12:31 p.m. and I've got nothing better to do right now, so I think I'm going to actually, get in a little bit of rage and a little bit of anger right now. No, it doesn't happen that way. It's completely unconscious and irrational, and CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, can help with that. Next is problem solving. Most of us are not effective problem solvers. As a matter of fact, and I say this, and it probably doesn't apply to, I would say, a significant percentage of people who listen to my podcast, but I'm going to tell you what is in short supply in the world, and that is critical thinking skills. And then, you're going to hear me say different things, which is more, I don't like this word, but I'm going to use, more evolved ways of being is not thinking at all, shutting down the left brain and working from sense and higher consciousness. But for the most part, in the 3D analytical world that we live in, critical thinking, critical thinking skills are in short supply. But learning problem solving skills is another way because if you've always got problems, guess what? For those of you, that's all interpretations and stories anyway. But if you've always got problems, you haven't learned problem solving skills. And when people always have problems, that generally throws them into anger and frustration and stress as well. And then number four, this was a big one, and this used to apply to me, is learning how to effectively communicate. As a kid, I was not allowed. I grew up a small town Texas farm boy. I've said it a bazillion times. In my household, it was demanded that I respect my parents. Now, the things that I hear today are shocking to me because if I used some of the language I hear kids talking to their parents with today, I literally would have been grounded until forever. I mean, when I was in high school, I told my mother, and some of you are going to fall out of your chair when you hear this. Well, I told my mother one time, are you ready? I just said, shut up, is what I told my mom. and I got grounded for 2 weeks for telling my mother to shut up. I mean, that is banal. Banal, not banal, but banal, meaning it's plain, it's simple compared to what kids say to their parents, some kids say to their parents now. But what I learned out of that is that I wasn't allowed to have a voice. I wasn't allowed to communicate my thoughts and my feelings. So that created a lot of anger in me as well, and I carried it into my adult life. So look at your own life. Can you communicate your feelings openly? And if you can't, that may be causing anger for you as well. So some four practical things we looked at is looking at your stories and expectations, CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, problem solving, and communication. A couple of more things here is self-hypnosis, which I think it was the last episode where I had mentioned the hypnosisdownloads.com, and I'd mentioned the learn instant self-hypnosis. That's one way, because I guarantee you when you're in self-hypnosis, you are not angry. Why? Because you've taken your analytical mind offline. But secondly, breathing and breathing down the anger, breathing through it. There's a technique that I recommend called the 7-11 breathing technique. It's also over at Hypnosis Downloads. And you can actually, we'll put the link here in the show notes, 7-11 breathing technique. Basically, you breathe in 7, exhale 11. Breathe in 7, exhale 11. By the time you've taken a half a dozen breaths like that, you're already in brainwave state called theta, which means you're deeply relaxed. But you can breathe down the anger and breathe through it as well. All right, so as Zen or shamanism or nebulous as this might be, your transformational takeaway is this week is this. If there is no anger in you, you cannot be angry. If there is no anger in you, you cannot be angry. Okay, the next episode I'm really looking forward to. Man, it was a life lesson for me, and I'm guaranteeing you, every single person that listens to this podcast, please listen to the next episode and share it with people that you know, because it can help a lot of people. All I'm going to tell you right now, the title of the next episode, and when you listen to it, I guarantee you're going to find it to be true. The title of the next episode is This is Your Greatest Cause of Suffering. This is your greatest cause of suffering. So make sure that you actually catch the podcast in a couple of days. And if you would, again, please share with your friends because it will help a lot of people. Okay, thanks for listening, and I'll catch you over on the next episode. Bye-bye. Thank you for listening to this entire podcast. If you're the kind of person who likes to help others, then share this with your friends and family. You know, if you found value, they will too. So please share via your social media channels. Also, if you have questions, I'm here to assist. You can email me questions to support@jimfortin.com, and I may even use your question for a future podcast episode. Also, if you want transformational content like this daily, connect with me on Instagram. My Instagram name is I am Jim Fortin. Finally, I do have a personal request. I believe that we're all here to help others and to grow and evolve ourselves. Together, you and I, let's help more people. If you would please leave a review on iTunes, and a good one by the way. I'd be grateful, and through your assistance together, we can transform more lives.